Time to open up the Christmas presents. We're back, Colts Corner, with myself, Kevin Bowen, and Eddie Garrison is across the way. This is always one of my favorite pods of the year, Eddie. You know, one thing I love about the draft is I just enjoy, honestly, getting to know new players and, you know, starting to project their fit into, okay, this is what it looks like. Okay, I can kind of see where the Colts are thinking on this. Some of these, okay, I don't necessarily know, where the exact fit is, but it's fun to go through all these guys, learn a little bit about their background, and start to look ahead to the 2025 season. Thank you to everybody out there for consuming the draft content. 107.5 The Fan. We've got probably about a dozen stories up there from draft weekend, and this will be our full pod recap. Eddie, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Pacers one win away from dismantling the Bucks, or dispatching the Bucks, I should say. And
well, you could say they've dismantled them too.
Yeah, they've dismantled them in three, and they got dismantled in the other.
Yeah, and honestly, 8 halves into the series they've been the superior team for about 7 of them. So Pacers in the month of May is always a good thing here in the Circle City, and we'll be getting that here coming up in 2025. We'll go pick by pick here, 8 of them in total. They entered the draft with 7, so a little below average for Chris Ballard. He's usually in the 9 to 10 pick range, so we'll go over each of them individually. I think we've done this now the last couple of years. I enjoy just kind of going pick by pick. That we'll save probably Twitter questions for next week. I think we get into a few of them inevitably here with our discussions. But, Eddie, let's just begin overall. I would say something that stood out to me about this class, and it didn't sound like it was a huge Chris Ballard focus. It's just kind of how it played out. But I would say this is the most I've seen a Chris Ballard draft class with accomplished college players at pretty big schools, and I don't really see, where's your day 3 super Raz dude from a small school?
Yep.
Where's your project? Maybe Jalen Travis?
Where's your day 3 linebacker?
Well, that too. I mean, I guess technically Hunter Wohler, will be some of that. But yes, we'll get into that. But I just thought in general, if you look at the schools, if you look at the multi-year production that really each of them had, that's a little different for me. I mean, JT Tuimoloau is a 3-time first-team All-Big Ten player.
Wait, how'd you say that?
Tuimoloau.
Okay.
I hope it's right. I think it's right. It probably isn't right. Justin Wally, 4-year starter at Minnesota. Again, Travis is probably the one. Transferred from Princeton to Iowa State, big tackle. Just a 1-year starter. In the Big 12, DJ Giddens, 1,000-yard rusher, twice at Kansas State. Certainly Riley Leonard, big stages, big schools, et cetera, et cetera. Tim Smith played double-digit games for Alabama for 5 years, and then Hunter Wohler led Wisconsin in tackles, 2 seasons. You don't just see that consistently through the draft. So I'd probably start there. If you look at it, Eddie, the positional mock that we did, that hit pretty accurately. Tight end in 1, D-line
You mean
in
you?
2.
I didn't contribute at all to that.
Well, this is a we. Pronouns are a big thing in today's climate, so I like to go we on that.
Okay.
Running back in 5, quarterback in 6, I guess safety / linebacker in 7. But as you brought up, if you would have told me last Monday, Eddie, hey, the Colts are going to go 230 picks before they take a linebacker or a guard, I would have been like, what? That's where I do scratch my head here on this Monday morning. If you're Matt Gonzalez, if you are Jalen Carlisle, you have to be thrilled that this draft played out in the manner that they did. Now, they still have cap space. I'll be curious if they add at all to those positions, but Chris Ballard doesn't. I mean, I don't think his draft didn't reflect that. He didn't seem, too urgent there when describing those two and their situations. But I think competition is lacking at those spots. Especially Carlisle, when you think about it, man. I mean, he had 2 rather significant injuries as a rookie and, position switch. And I don't know, maybe I'm getting too down a rabbit hole, but do you look at the injuries and say, hey, he was playing closer to the line of scrimmage? Did any of that come from, making the switch from safety to linebacker? So that stood out. No trade backs in the first 3 rounds. first time since 2017, Ballard has not touched any of the first 3 picks with a trade. Usually he's trading back in 2 or 3. If you would have told me Friday morning that they would stay at 45 and stay at 80, I would not have guessed that. So it shows you what they think of Tui, Malawau, and Wally, that they stood there and took both of them. Defensive emphasis. I mean, think about the offseason as a whole, Eddie. You change the coordinator. You give out maybe the 2 biggest contracts in the Ballard era in the secondary, and then you spend 2 of your first 3 picks on defense. I mean, those are 4 major investments into that side of the ball, not to mention Louis Anarumo certainly is going to change the scheme, and I would say probably the most significant manner since you went from, what would that have been, Ted Monachino, Greg Minuski, I'm trying to think who the coordinators were, to Matt Eberflus back in 2018. So that pretty much covers, I think, overall my thoughts. I know there are people out there that kind of gripe over like, oh, he's taking another defensive end. Oh, he's taking another corner. I'm like, well, guys, just because you miss there doesn't mean you stop. I mean, those positions mean too much. And yes, he is, like, if you could sum up the Ballard defensive issues, you could probably sum them up with, well, he's constantly swung and missed at DN. He's swung and missed at corner, not to the degree at DN, but still, I mean, there are misses at corner as well with early picks. So I'm not of this camp of, oh yeah, just because you've missed there a lot, you stop drafting them. No, I don't. I mean, again, this gets into more of a Ballard, should he have his job in the 9th year sort of debate, which is different than continuing to pick there. And you are changing the scheme. So, that would be something, to keep an eye on as well. So, Eddie, let's start there. Overall thoughts before we get into each of the 8 picks.
I thought it was interesting that they didn't address guard really specific or linebacker specific, because you and I were both talking about it, and as was pretty much everyone else on the Colts beat, about how those were probably 2 of the most obvious needs after tight end on the roster. You could throw in defensive tackle as well, and it just seems like there was a little bit of a shift from Ballard in the way he drafted these players, as you noted, the college production. So maybe this is coming more from trying to get players that Lou Anarumo desires that would fit his system. Like Wally, for example, out of Minnesota, he's on the shorter side in terms of height and length, but Chris Ballard still went with him just because of his athleticism and the speed he shows on tape. So it'll be interesting to see how these guys play out. And then I don't think you touched on it, but DJ Giddens being the running back they selected, I thought it was a little bit interesting too, because
he's very intriguing to me.
Yeah, from Kansas State, he was pretty much a 3-down back for them, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. We were thinking, when we went into this, Kevin, about just like a guy who had the chance to be like Jaden Blue, for example, was primarily a receiving back. Instead, they probably look at the long-term future behind Jonathan Taylor here by picking Giddens instead.
I'm looking forward to getting into Giddens a little bit more here when we break down each pick, because I do think he might be the most intriguing pick just out of general curiosity, honestly, of the 8. And the Wally selection, I'm not as anti-corner height as some others are. And it was kind of funny when that pick happened. I did tweet out, it is an anti-Chris Ballard pick, a 5'10 corner. I had NFL assistant text me right away when the pick happened. I was like, dude, I love Wally. And so I'll kind of share a little bit of that when we get to him individually. One thing to add on that first point you made, I think what's interesting about no right guard or linebacker, Eddie, is at each of those spots, the favorite are both guys that are making largely position switches from college. Now, Carlisle, we saw him do it as a rookie. Gonzalez, we haven't seen it yet. He had I'm trying to think of Grand Park. I remember looking at him and playing guard a couple times, but not very often. Did he do guard, last year, and, was primarily a tackle at Pittsburgh. And, of course, missed a lot of time his senior year with that foot injury. So, this is different than, like, Tanner Bortolini at center. With you handing the keys to Bortolini, he center. That's what he played as a rookie, and that's what you were used to in college, especially when Joe Tippmann was drafted in round 2 by the Jets. That's a little different with Gonzalez and Carlisle. So, again, do you see the occasional May free agent signing? You're still about a month away from 11-on-11 stuff. So that is something I think to keep an eye on as well. But unless you got anything else to add overall, let's go with pick-by-pick breakdown.
When is rookie minicamp?
Not this coming weekend, but the following weekend.
Okay.
Yeah, so they've done this under Steichen. They usually give them a week break. So this will be week 2 of OT, or week 2 of the offseason program. I want to say like May 9th maybe is the first minicamp practice. So what's that, a week from Friday?
A little bit of luck was on the side of Chris Ballard. It's a Christmas miracle, as some may call it. First round, 14th overall, Tyler Warren falls to Indianapolis. Colston Loveland ends up going 10 to Chicago. What are your thoughts?
I guess let's start with Warren the player before we kind of get to Loveland going 10 and then Warren going 14. The last time Colts fans have universally been this happy.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Jonathan Taylor breaking in the open field against the Patriots was that a Saturday night football game?
Yeah. I was trying to think of draft specific. Andrew Luck.
Yeah, it's been a while. All right, why do you love him? I mean, obviously the numbers are insane. I don't need to go over the collegiate numbers. I would say two things why I kind of view Warren as like, man, he's just more than a tight end. First off, the versatility. Anybody that watched Penn State this season, and certainly I did this in the Orange Bowl a lot when he was playing against Notre Dame, there's a Where's Waldo with Warren. Inline, slot, out wide, backfield, wildcat. And I think there's also a bit of a misconception, Eddie, that when the tight ends do like Mark Andrews kind of sneaks in to do the tush push, it's much more than that for Warren at Penn State. He averaged 8 yards per carry. Per carry. This is not just, 1 yard, 2 yards in a cloud of dust, move the chains. No, there's more of that. Obviously, he's got to handle a lot mentally to be involved in all of those roles. And then I think stylistically as a tight end, the ability to create yards after catch has been such an issue for this team at the pass catching spots. That Warren offering that, and again, he does it more in a bully way. He does it more like Gronk, throwing people out of the club and less kind of running away from you. But that also is what stands out. And certainly you view that as, can that help out Anthony Richardson's greatest weakness of, can you ask your quarterback to make a 4-yard simple pitch and catch? Of course, I say simple in quotes, given Anthony Richardson. And then can the tight end say, here's 4, I'll make it 14? Because when you ask him to throw the 14-yarder in the air, now you're trying to throw it through another level of the defense. Now you're trying to do, your O-line's got to hold up for a little bit longer. But, Warren showed at Penn State, over 50% of his yards came after the catch.
Mm-hmm.
He shows the ability of high percentage throw, let me turn it into a bigger play. There's not a lot of tight ends that do that. So I think that's what certainly stands out. I was kind of curious. He was the only top 30 visit he had was with the Colts.
Really?
You don't usually see that at all. Ballard said he wanted to sit down and talk with him. Ballard wouldn't offer really anything on why the Colts did that. I don't know why they felt the need, honestly, to do that. But, certainly just watch the USC game. I mean, I remember watching that. It was a 3:30 game on a Saturday. It was beyond impressive what he did. 17 catches in that game. To get them back in the game, they line him up at center, throw a double pass. He mosses a dude in the end zone. I mean, it just sums up Warren really in one play. That's what he's at his best, is like, okay, can he go up and get it? That catch radius is more 50-50 when you throw it in his direction. I thought it was interesting that Ballard brought up the old toughness word.
Mm-hmm.
He brought that up a lot at the end of the season, and he certainly went there a couple of different times during the press conference about Warren. I think there are some kind of Quentin Nelson, a little bit of a quiet worker, sort of a quiet, he's loud on the field, but he kind of does it in a quiet manner, at least verbally. We've gone over this. I mean, look at the Final Four teams each of the last 2 years. Tight ends galore are on those teams. Kelsey, Goddard, Kincaid, Ertz, Mark Andrews, George Kittle, Sam Laporta. I mean, these are tight ends here. So it's an attempt at stop being average. Try to be more than serviceable at tight end. And I'm totally good with it. It sounds like the Bears kind of viewed Loveland more like Sam Laporta, Ben Johnson days with the Lions. Kind of complements Cole Kmet a little bit more. I would have been very interested to see who the Colts would have taken, Loveland or Warren. I know Loveland went on Chicago radio and mentioned that he thought the Colts would have been a team that was going to take him, so he clearly felt some interest from the Colts here. But I guess that kind of covers everything Warren-wise, unless you got anything else.
He kind of reminds me of a better version of Taysom Hill.
Yeah.
Just because, New Orleans lines him up everywhere. They use him everywhere. I have a feeling that will probably be the same with Tyler Warren.
Yeah, I could certainly see where you're coming from on that. I think he is a very good tight end, but he's more than a tight end, just in his ability to move him around. Again, the 8 yards per carry. And can you imagine like Warren, Taylor, Richardson in a goal line package?
Wishbone?
Right. Seriously. Something along those lines with how they would line him up.
Bust out Eric Moore's wing T offense.
Sign me up for that. And I think there's a little bit of a misconception too, Eddie, of like the tight end issue was just an Anthony Richardson issue. It's not like Flacco and the tight ends had great success either.
Nope.
So to me, it's kind of an overall room. I guess the last thing on it, maybe a little weird that he didn't test. I know Rick Venturi, and he's kind of getting in the nitpicky element of like, is he a true 4.4 guy? I watch him play football and think the football speed is quite evident. But he is probably not a guy that's going to separate with speed.
No.
And so I think that would be maybe one question I do have at the NFL level. Can he continue to throw dudes out of the club? Because you and I talked about this throughout the draft process, Eddie. You go back and, I certainly watched the Orange Bowl. He made some Notre Dame defenders look like they were playing at Holy Cross. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm not used to Xavier Watts and Jay Nosberry and some of those guys looking like that. And so does that translate to the NFL level? But yeah, positional value, positional need, I thought met, where you were at the board, and certainly great work by their pro scouting staff to sit there and say, when Loveland picked at 10, we're not going to panic. Mm-hmm. We're going to stay here at 14 and believe that Warren will fall to us, and he definitely did.
Chris Ballard called it the easiest pick since Quentin Nelson. I think the part that you haven't mentioned that it is worth mentioning, I think he's one of the smarter football players in the draft too. His football IQ is off the charts. He's really good at reading zone coverages and finding the soft spot in zone. So with so many teams now going to the too high and zone underneath, it'll be interesting to see how much they utilize him over the middle of the field, because as Ballard has noted since pretty much the end of the season, I think it's been on like at least 3 times, they have to be better over the middle of the field just for a presence to help open up things on the outside for Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman Jr. In round number 2, all right, Kevin, I'm going to give it a crack at it. JT Tuimoloau.
Boy, I think that's pretty good. I don't know if you got on base cleanly, but I think you're on base.
Yeah. I was looking at the phonetic spelling. I was trying to make it sound fluent.
Tuimoloau.
Yeah. Yep.
Maybe. I don't know. Boy, again, you watch Ohio State, he was making plays. 3-time first-team All-Big Ten. I don't know how many of those you have out there, especially as the Big Ten expands. He describes his play style as passionate and powerful. I'm afraid to even say this out loud just because I think people have mixed reviews on how this guy's career has gone so far. But I do kind of get a little bit of Kwity Paye vibes from him. 260 plus, can slide inside in a pinch. Now, what was different about Tuimoloau versus Paye in college? JTT's got much more college production than what Paye had. Paye had kind of the crazy testing. But, man, I watched Ohio State, and certainly Notre Dame played them each the last 2 years and watched them a whole lot. It just seemed like I found myself being like, oh, yeah, of course it was number 44. I remember the Penn State game. That would have been maybe his sophomore year. It was absurd what he did in that game. Ryan Day and Chris Ballard had a conversation Friday before the draft, and Ryan Day is asking Ballard, why didn't he go in round 1? He was kind of confused by that aspect of it. But, very durable. I got no issue with another sort of defensive end. I don't know if it's the outright Dio Dengbo, but I could see some versatility. Again, I don't know if he's going to play inside on passing downs at the NFL level, but with stunts and things like that, I think you do feel comfortable with him doing that. He was outstanding in their playoff run, and those were big time opponents in Tennessee and Oregon and Notre Dame and Texas. So, I'm good with it. I look at it and think to myself, okay, what's the future defensive end? What does it mean for Kwity Paye in a contract year? Tyquan Lewis and Samson Ebukam are getting up there, and they've had injuries, of course. Latu, to me, is kind of more the pure edge guy, whereas Tulimaloau can be a little bit more of a move him a little bit all over, or I guess, move him a little bit more. Probably a 3-down guy more than Latu. So I guess Zaire Franklin will get a call or two about jersey number 44, won't he?
Yeah, I would assume so. And I don't think Zaire's going to give it up by any means necessary.
I would agree with that.
On the JT front, I just think not Jonathan Taylor.
Who did announce the pick and did a very nice job.
I was about to say, how fitting is it that JT was introducing JT? I think the one thing he does lack a little bit, Kevin, is just bend. I think in speed off the edge. I think he's more of your bully. He's your guy who's going to try and overpower you and rely on his power and his strength to beat you, and not so much as in like a finesse or a speed type of guy, a speed rush.
Right. I think there's a little bit of he's got a little bit more to the arsenal. Again, can play inside in a pinch. Passionate and powerful, high motor. These might not be the sexiest traits in the world, because there are other defensive ends in this draft that went around him that they might have more of the
Mike Green,
the length. Yeah, I'm thinking even like Landon Jackson went a little bit later. The Birch kid from Oregon, just a little bit more eye popping. Like, you want him coming off the bus first, and then you want him testing first. I don't want to act like Tulimaloau is like a poor athlete or looks like he doesn't belong, because you aren't a first team all Big Ten guy 3 straight years playing for Ohio State with that sort of production without that. And he was a super highly ranked recruit as well coming out of high school here. But yeah, to me, this is I'd be stunned if he was a bust. I think it's a very safe pick. Mm-hmm. And I know that comes with some negative connotations at times. But at that position, when you think about it, Eddie, the Colts have struggled to even find safe.
Yeah.
They've missed a lot there at defensive end in this general draft range. So they stayed at 45 and took the Ohio State defensive end.
And when they did find something, they let him walk. And Dio Dengbo.
Right. And what do you do with Paye? Paye is in the contract year next year. I don't think you can ignore that. And just overall, as we get to, Justin Wally here, Lou Anarumo, it's just, the Ballard conversation we had at the Combine of, we're going to have to scout our defensive line a little bit differently. So, it's probably good to just take a little inventory now, Eddie, of, okay, who are the defensive players they drafted under Anarumo? Who are the free agents they signed under him? That starts to become a little bit more of a thing I think we should keep note of.
You already mentioned it. Justin Wally out of Minnesota was the Colts' 3rd round selection. A little bit on the undersized part, but as you put it in your story on 1075thefan.com, small but feisty.
Yeah, and he, again, I was sharing with you earlier, when I tweeted out, 5'10", kind of the anti-Chris Ballard pick, I had NFL coach text me saying, I loved him. Likes him more nickel. I know the Colts are a little bit more like, no, we think he can play outside. This guy thinks really thinks another Kenny Moore.
Yep.
Football player, twitchy, smart as hell. Maybe he doesn't have the wingspan. One thing where Kenny kind of made up for his lack of height was his wingspan. Justin doesn't necessarily have that at 5'10", but with his speed and running 4.4, sub 4.4, and just the competitiveness on the ball, I don't know. A little bit I watch him, I'm like, there's some Isaiah Rodgers to his game a little bit. I thought Rodgers was a pretty nice corner when he was here. And I'm not as married as like you just need all these 6'1", 6'2", super long guys. Like I think some of these guys that are shorter like Wally can be
he found his Mike Hilton.
Pretty competitive. I honestly, that was my first thought, Eddie, was like you think about how much the slot meant to Lou Anarumo in Cincinnati. Is this that? Now, a reminder, Kenny Moore is under contract through 2026. It's not like he's in the Braden Smith contract year.
Right.
But, he is nearing the age of 30. And the Colts are going to play more sub packages, which I think is worth pointing out when you think back to linebacker. They're going to play more nickel and dime. And so that obviously is going to lessen the need to have multiple linebackers on the field. Could he factor in with that? But, again, no trade back here. I was surprised. I mean, that clearly, when Ballard is not trading back, he really, really likes these guys. And Wally was even surprised. He was like, yeah, I thought I'd go anywhere from round 2 to 6. So I think he was a little surprised to hear his name go middle of round 3. I know the scouting world, per se, I didn't think maybe as highly of him as some people in the NFL thought. I don't know what 2025 looks like for him. I still think a Jalen Jones, Javaris Ward, Kenny Moore trio is pretty obvious. I guess debating how the rest of the cornerback room with Juju Brents and Samuel Womack shakes out will be something to keep an eye on here. But yes, Justin Wally, a 4-year starter. I believe a cousin of Dante Moncrief.
Correct.
Mississippi native in round 3.
Moving on to round 4, the Colts go offensive line with the big boy, Jalen Travis.
Big boy might be an understatement.
Gargantuan is how you described him.
8, 339, absolutely massive. Do you remember Ross Travis?
Yes.
Former Colt tight end?
Yes.
That's his cousin. His brother Reed played collegiately basketball at Kentucky. It kind of reminds me of the Alec Pierce family a little bit here. Jalen Travis, thought to be a little bit more of a pass protector than a run defender. I know people see the frame, 6'8", 339. They're like, oh, wow, could he move to guard and be a run guy? Or I should say a run blocker. Doesn't sound like that. Again, played at Princeton. I mean, like a wild major at Princeton. I probably should rattle it all off, but
he wants to go to law school after his career, right?
Yeah, he wants to go to law school. And remember, the Colts have Iowa State connections. Tom Manning, their tight ends coach, was the OC under Matt Campbell there. So they've got a little bit of a coaching staff connection. Played 1 year at Iowa State at left tackle. So, look at him as a swing tackle. I think that's kind of how I view 2025. Basically, the next Blake Freeland. That is kind of how I look at it, with the potential, of course, with Braden Smith's departure, to see what happens. When you think about it, Eddie, the Colts have kind of had a little bit of a mixed bag with these types of middle round tackle picks when you think about it. Whether it's Ryman, certainly a hit. Freeland hasn't been that. Gonzalez, we're kind of still wait and see on that. Here's another attempt at it. Really a 4 straight year.
Zach Banner?
In the 3rd or 4th. Well, yeah, Banner going way back, obviously, was a bust. Played AAU with Chet Holmgren and Jalen Suggs.
Tyrese Halliburton's cousin.
Correct, yes. Tyrese Halliburton's cousin. And dates Van Lith, right?
Jalen Suggs does, yes.
Yes, if we're going to bring it full circle here. So, I would have thought guard, more tackle.
Look at you being up to date on...
I know. I can't believe I know that. I thought that would have been the focus. And, if you would have told me, hey, they draft one offensive lineman in this draft, I could have seen like a college tackle that they think will play guard in the NFL. This doesn't appear to be that. This appears to be a college tackle that will be a tackle in the NFL, which, again, I don't want to disc, that's still a need. If I were going to rank the O-line needs, though, I'd probably rank guard above it. But Jalen Travis there after a 10-pick trade back in round 4.
That was the first and only trade back, correct?
Correct. Yep, they added the 6th-rounder for that one.
Moving on to round number 5, they go running back DJ Giddens out of Kansas State. We've already kind of talked about him a little bit, but you wanted to dive more into Giddens because he was one of the more interesting picks for you.
I don't follow it, Eddie, in how he was still there in the middle of 5. hear me out on this. Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons at Kansas State.
Yep.
6 foot 212 and ran 4.4.
Uh-huh.
So size, speed. He tested very well as a jumper, too, at the combine. Size, speed, 2,000-yard seasons in the Big 12. Had some moments on third down. I don't want to act like it was perfect. He mentioned his pass protection needs work and said that a wrist injury kind of hindered him a little bit there. But he did have some drops as well. Good ball security in college. I don't – maybe it's how running back is valued or devalued, I should say, a little bit when it comes to the draft. But, this was a little bit of a surprise and like, wow, he was there. And honestly, he might be a little bit more of a no, we feel like he's a first and second down option besides Taylor. When you and I talked about running back throughout the draft process, Eddie, I was probably more on the, like, give me the hybrid receiver that's playing running back. He had some moments on third down, but for him to play that role, I think you got to fine-tune some stuff there. He honestly is probably more of just a good, hey, Taylor's out for a game or two. He might be able to help you out more than just the traditional third down back would. So this is probably the most interesting pick to me in that you don't usually see resumes like this last as long as it did in the draft. And he also had a really nice yards per catch. I think it was north of 11, which for me, that's a big number when it comes to being a running back. So that is something of note.
His build kind of reminds me of Raheem Mostert a little bit, just like the way he, his body is.
I could see that for sure. Yep.
I don't know why.
But again, when you look at the size, when I think of a running back that's in round 5, to me, at that point of the draft, you either don't have size, you don't have 3-down ability, and I'm saying you don't have one of these traits. You had issues in ball security. Your 40 time might have been 4.55, something like that. Maybe you had injury issues as well. I don't really see that from Giddens. So running back in round 5 maybe looked a little bit different from the actual skill set, but if you want to view it, this might be a little bit more of a no. We actually think this guy can handle more of a workload on first and second down than some other options could have been.
Kev, I hate this time of year. My allergies are all screwed up. I woke up this morning, my eyes were all itchy.
Dude, I sneezed 16 times on the way into work.
I couldn't stop itching them. I'm like, golly.
I thought you meant your eyes were watering when you saw the Colts pick Riley Leonard.
No. I was, no. You don't want to know what that reaction was because he was their next pick. The 6th round, 189th overall.
Boy, that turned uber negative on Riley Leonard. He's one of a kind. How about Leonard having the Colts gear ready? Had the hat, had the shirt. Said it was one of 2 teams' gears that he had. He was pretty adamant, or definitely had a feeling that he'd be a Colt.
Playing for the shoe?
It was wild how many people reached out to me and they're like, man, can you believe it? They took Leonard. Like, aren't you thrilled? And I'm like, well, do you want me to be honest? Or do you want me to be like a fan? And I watched obviously every snap Riley Leonard took at Notre Dame. And maybe I've seen too much and maybe I'm too fanny, whereas like some of the negatives bother me more than they should. But let me just offer my full thoughts on Leonard. First off, he did miss a substantial period of the offseason, transferred from Duke to Notre Dame with an injury. So, maybe I should give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt then of like, hey, new offense, new personnel, that hindered some things as a thrower. But I guess I'll start here. Eddie, Riley Leonard is 6'4" and 216 pounds. Great size, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can make plays with his legs, can he not?
He can indeed.
Tough as hell. The man is
is
puking on the sidelines after leading Notre Dame on an opening drive touchdown against Ohio State in the national title. Character you dream of. Dream of character like that. He led Notre Dame to a national championship game.
Yep.
That hasn't happened in quite some time. So I ask you, why the hell did he fall till pick 189?
He can't throw the football accurately. inconsistently?
Am I allowed to say it? I think he's like the white Anthony Richardson on the field. I mean,
You're
that's
probably not right.
like that's
you're
just
right.
kind of how I viewed him as a thrower. I don't know how many times, and you were such a good sport about it. You would entertain my Notre Dame talks throughout their playoff run. I said the biggest key for Notre Dame is avoiding Riley Leonard having to throw a consequential pass in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
They blew Indiana out. The Georgia game, they made big plays on special teams, and Leonard just put his body on the line in the fourth quarter, iced that game. And what happened against Penn State? He had to throw a consequential pass. It got picked. And then they got fortunate. A Penn State defender fell down, and then they picked Drew Aller to win the game. Ohio State, he certainly helped get them back in the game. That was one of those, I think, more of a, hey, you're down, 3-4 scores. You're kind of benefiting from that. So, again, he fell to 189 for a reason. I think a couple things also to point out, and I thought Leonard was very candid on his conference call in saying, like, hey, I need to operate from the pocket better. I need to prove that I can operate from the pocket at the NFL level. My question for that, Eddie, would be, where do those reps come?
Yeah.
He needs them. Well, so do Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. So I think this what makes the day 3 quarterback dilemma difficult. What should be your cup of tea at quarterback on day 3? Should it be high ceiling like Leonard? Or should it be high floor like Curtis Rourke? Or Sam Ehlinger? Or Brock Purdy?
McCord?
Yeah, that's what I think makes it. I would probably flip-flop every year. I'd probably go 1 high ceiling, 1 keep me afloat.
Every year?
Yeah. I would trade. I mean, nowadays, aren't you carrying 4 quarterbacks?
Yeah, Jason Bean.
Right. So, Bean and Leonard will compete for the 3rd spot. I mean, gosh, you listen to the draft call, and Ballard and Steichen sounds like they're talking to their son. It's just, they're just, again, you are obsessed with the character. Obviously, toughness on full display. Hell, it's Phillip Rivers' hometown where Rivers currently resides. Fairhope is where Riley Leonard's from.
Working out with Phillip Rivers, right?
Working out with him. Got dinner with Daniel Jones, he said a few weeks ago as well, when he was back at Duke. So, boy, he puts his body on the line. Great athlete. And look, it's not just the Northern Illinois game. The USC game, he threw a horrible interception that almost cost them a playoff berth. Go back to that Penn State game. He just doesn't see the defensive lineman dropping in coverage.
Yep.
And throws a huge pick there late in that game. So, it's pick 189. I probably should shut up now. But those are my Leonard thoughts.
Do you watch Draft Day, by the way?
I have seen it before, yeah.
I know you've seen it, but that wasn't what I asked you. Do you watch it every year?
No. I watched it one time coming back from a Colts game on a flight. It was a non-consequential. It might have been a Colts preseason game. I watched it. I thought it was mediocre.
Okay, well, we can't be friends anymore.
That was about it. Are you like Joel Erickson? You watch it every morning when you wake up? You're like YouTubing the highlights of it like I do, Rudy?
Not every morning. I just watch it every year around the draft time, like a sane human being.
Was there a Riley Leonard connection to this?
No.
Oh.
None at all.
All right.
No, I was just curious. Now, was that the pick they picked up in the trade back, or was the next
Tim
pick?
Smith was.
Yep.
Yeah, Tim Smith at 190. What a great name. Tim Smith. Much easier than JT Tuimoloau.
Can you trust a guy with 2 names, first names?
Well, I don't know. Smith as a first name there. Played a lot at Alabama, double-digit games in 5 years. Senior Bowl guy. I think I mentioned this when Lou Anarumo kind of took a deeper dive into what he had in Cincinnati. Eddie, he had a lot of fat dudes. He had a lot of big dudes eating up space.
A lot of fat dudes.
He doesn't really have a lot of those guys here. And Tim Smith, to be fair, honestly, he's built a little bit like Grover. 6'4", 306, kind of talks like Grover a little bit as well. So defensive tackle obviously has been an issue when Grover and or DeForest Buckner have been off the field. I look at him as more Grover Stewart backup than DeForest Buckner backup, but Neville Gallimore, of course, signed in free agency. You got to retool some things here. Probably a little bit more space eater than anything, but certainly will have a chance to turn over the leaves as the backup defensive tackles.
And then rounding out the NFL draft picks for the Colts this year, 232, Wisconsin linebacker Hunter Wohler.
Yeah, I kind of like this dude. He's got a nice resume, led Wisconsin in tackles each out of the last couple of years, or at least each of the last 2 years. I get how the NFL's trended, and the Colts have been about this. Give us the bigger safety, let them play close to the line of scrimmage at the NFL, closer to the line of scrimmage. Also was a punt returner at Wisconsin. I mean, that's some toughness. You don't see many safeties as your punt returner. I'm getting some Tom Zabikowski vibes from this. Ballard mentioned Daniel Sorensen, for those that have certainly seen him play big roles for the Chiefs here lately. I could see where Ballard is coming from on that. Might as well. Linebacker, I have no idea who will make the roster at linebacker. I think it's wide open. Linebackers 3, 4, and 5 on this team. You need some special teams help with, Grant Stewart gone, even a little bit of EJ Speed, Kylan Granson gone as well. Wohler for a 7th-round pick. He's not, again, when you think 7th-round picks, you think remember the dude they took from Northern Michigan, Jake Witt?
Yep, or Titus Leo.
I know he wasn't around 6.
Yeah.
Jonah Lualu last year from Oklahoma. That's what you think of, just these crazy testing athletes. And Wohler has a nice RAS, especially when you project him as a linebacker. But again, he led Wisconsin in tackles each of the last 2 years. I know Wisconsin was a little bit down, but that stands out to me. So, for Wohler in round 7, even Tim Smith in round 6, oftentimes when you're taken at that point of the drafts, you might be a little bit like, ooh, did I want to go? Well, I think they actually walk into depth charts where it's pretty open. So I'll be curious to see, how much Wohler can impact things.
Yeah, me too. Anything else to add, KB? Anything else coming out on the website?
Looked like they got an undrafted kicker from Temple who made a 64-yarder and a 60-yarder in college.
Is that your training camp kicking competition?
I guess. And I think the 64-yarder he made at Lincoln Financial, which, that's an NFL stadium, of course.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how that. He was 16-22 at Temple this past year. But, a couple kickers got drafted, so I was curious, would the Colts go there? Ballard poo-pooed that when I asked him on Friday night if they would draft a kicker.
Frickin' Bowen asking these dumbass questions.
On Saturday. Didn't go there, but I think inside he probably thought that. Certainly. Anything else? Colts draft, Eddie? Shout out to the Jags. I respect the move up for Hunter.
Really?
Think about it. Lawrence is on, kind of life support, really. New regime. If Hunter's playing offense for you, can you imagine him and Brian Thomas stretching a defense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Jack Kaiser to the Jags as well.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that. So
only matter if they can keep Lawrence in the pocket and keep Lawrence healthy by not, him getting hit.
Gosh, it was that Colts game, that freak injury kind of late in that Colts game.
The knee injury? Yeah.
That was weird. But all in all, I guess to sum up the Colts draft, again, it seems, I don't know if how intentional it was. It doesn't sound like it was super intentional, but maybe it will, there's a sprinkle of it. For the most part, some pretty productive college players at notable schools. So that's a little different than how they've operated. They still certainly have some high testing athletes, but a little bit different than that. Maybe not as reliant from a RAS score as they typically are. So again, we've got article recaps up on the website, 1075 The Fan. I'll continue to do more of this. I did 10 takeaways from the draft. That's up there. We'll do a winners and losers article. I do that annually from the Colts draft. So 1075 The Fan, you got to be there. Tons and tons of draft content. Eddie Garrison, anything else?
Nothing from me.
Good luck with your allergies. Good luck
You
to
too.
myself as well. Everybody have a great week. Thank you for listening to Colts Corner with Kevin Bone.